Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jennifer Lezak, Coordinator of Special Projects at the Adult Services Department. And on behalf of everyone at the Chicago Public Library, welcome. Tonight's program is part of the 2020 One Book One Chicago season, exploring the theme Beyond Borders and the book Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. For more information on other virtual programs, including book discussions, author events, workshops, and more, visit onebookonechicago.org. Tonight, we are so pleased to welcome H.J. Lee, Julian Kim, and Peter Lee for our program Korean American Stories on Film. Thanks to the Chicago Public Library Foundation, Bank of America, Union Pacific, and United Airlines for their support in making this season of One Book One Chicago possible. During tonight's program, we'll be monitoring the chat for questions from the audience for our Q&A following the conversation, so please feel free to ask one. This program is co-sponsored by CPL's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Committee, and my thanks to them for making tonight's program possible. Here, representing the committee and all of their fine work in celebrating diversity throughout the year at CPL, I am pleased to welcome my colleague, Young Park, to introduce tonight's program. Please join me in welcoming Young to the CPL virtual stage. Young?
Thank you, Jennifer. My name is Young Park, and I'm an Adult Services Librarian at the Chicago Public Library, Albany Park Branch. Tonight's program is Korean American Immigrant Stories on Film. We will watch a short film titled Cold Taxi and have a discussion on it. The film was presented by Korean American Stories.org in 2014. The audiences can post their questions to the director and the producers during this program today. The producer and the director have also prepared the prompt to audiences who can answer in the chat box. Please type your questions and answers in the chat box, which is located at the right side on your screen. Tonight, we will learn what Korean American Stories.org is and why they have been collecting the stories of Korean Americans, how they translated the stories, and lastly, what we can learn from them. Now, I would like to introduce you to H.J. Lee, who is a co-founder and the executive director of Korean American Story.org and his guest from New York City. Welcome, Mr. Lee, to Chicago Public Library.
Thank you. Thank you, Young. Thank you, Jennifer and Chicago Public Library for inviting us to this program. We're excited to be here to share our stories with all of you who are attending this evening. My name is H.J. Lee, and I am a co-founder and the executive director of Korean American Story.org, as Young mentioned. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to create, capture, preserve, and share the stories of the Korean American experience. This is our 10th year in operation, but for today's context, we are the executive producer of the short film Call Taxi that you will be watching tonight, all of us together, actually. The genesis of Korean American Story began when I was in college in New York City back in 1980s, around the time when the Korean greengrocers were popping up all around New York City. I was coming home early one morning and I saw a middle-aged Korean man sitting on a box, polishing his apples, and then carefully arranging them on display. For some reason, I carried this image in my head for many years. I thought to myself, if I showed that image to any immigrant family, I think it will say something about their own experience. So I began to think about the power of iconic images and the works of art as mediums that can preserve our history. And this was the spark that prompted my wife and I to start KoreanAmericanStory.org in 2010. We began actually by setting up a camera and recording my mom and my dad in the basement asking them questions about their lives during the Japanese occupation of Korea and the Korean War, and their feelings and thoughts during their early years in America. Did they have any regrets? This became our first project called the Legacy Project, which was created to enable families to record the stories of their parents and grandparents, to preserve their family's oral history while contributing to the collective history of Korean American community, as all of our content will be archived at the Korean Heritage Library of the University of Southern California. It has since expanded to include stories of Korean adoptees, LGBTQIA+, and biracial Korean Americans, to reflect the growing diversity of our community. We have recorded over 180 Legacy Project videos around the country, and actually many in Chicago. We do this as a free service for our community, funded by the donations from generous individual donors. We have a number of other projects, including a live storytelling competition in Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. It's called Roar Story Slam. We produced a podcast called Kpop, featuring Korean Americans in arts and culture. And we do an annual kimchi making event. Our most recent series is called 6 Feet Apart, which documents the experiences of Korean American community during an unprecedented time of COVID and anti-Asian violence. You could check out all of our projects in an electronic brochure, and the link you should be able to find it in the chat box. Finally, we made a short video to summarize some of the highlights of our work during the first 10 years of our existence. It's about 3.5 minutes long, so I will see you on the other side.
My name is Kwon Suk-kyung. I came here 1973. 나이를 먼저 해야 되는데. 다시요? 다시요? 땀난다. Well done. 아, 그 영어 그 힘드네.
There's nobody that worked as hard as my mom. No one who sacrificed as much as my mom did for her children.
I didn't know how to help my son. The only thing I could do for him is not let go of his hand.
하나님이 나에게 없었더라면 나는 이민 생활을 못했을 겁니다.
Before I died, I would make mirrors so that kids like me might see themselves reflected back and might not feel so monstrous for it.
Living Christian, Korean, conservative, living in a very tight bubble, and now being on my own, I'm just like, whoa, 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 self-love, wait a minute.
I have a purpose, and I just keep putting my nose to the grindstone and working.
Being Korean is the underdog in America. Being from Philly is the underdog story.
If it's all about striking while the iron is hot, like right now, Asian Americans, the stuff that we're doing, like if we're contributing right now, like maybe it's a snowball effect.
Mm-hmm. We are part of Korea's unspoken history.
Fermented pickled sweet goodness swirled up in red hot chili flakes, and with one strong inhale, my fate was sealed.
Second 6. Fell asleep. Take 2.
Hello and welcome to Kpop, the podcast about Korean Americans in arts and culture from Korean American stories.
For the first time in my entire life, I've never felt more connected to humanity. I feel like we're literally all in this fight together.
You see, this is the divide. We do not see eye to eye or coincide with each other. This is the generation gap.
단지 크게 재산적으로 이뤘지만 정신적인 재산. 식구들과 더 튼튼해지고 서로 사랑하고 기도해주는.
Believe in yourself and form your own identity, because not necessarily going to be fully accepted into any of the societies that you live in.
She said, I thought I had a son, but I have a daughter instead, and that's okay. I love you.
This is my place. Korean American, imperfect, unapologetic, learning to take up space.
continue to understand that it's not just about us, because as they say, you know, a rising tide raises all boats, and that's how we have to view ourselves.
You tiptoe and you have to tightrope between that hyphen, you know, of Korean and American. They're trying to balance where you stand.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Tonight's short film, Call Taxi, was made by Julian Kim and Peter Lee, who are here tonight. And KoreanAmericanStory.org was the executive producer of this film. This was the first film we worked together with Peter and Julian, and most recently we made a feature-length film together called Happy Cleaners. We anticipate that Happy Cleaners will be in streaming video services like Amazon or Netflix by January of 2021. Normally, we produce content that is first-person narrative, usually someone sharing a story of their real-life personal experience. Call Taxi was our first foray into creating a fictional narrative. The main impetus to produce Call Taxi came from our desire to see more authentic films about our community in the mainstream, with characters that are not caricatures nor stereotypes. We wanted to produce films about stories of our community, which is often marginalized and we're often made to feel other. The funding for the production and the post-production of the film was raised entirely through individuals as donations. So this film was truly a community project. So please enjoy the film Call Taxi, which will stream right now. And we'll see you back in about 17 minutes.
스탠포드 150. 네, 알겠습니다. 감사합니다. 10-2 JFK 모십니다. 10-2 Kpop 모십니다. 02번 10-2 기사 04번 10 받아겠습니다. 네, 카피 감사합니다.
Hey, Sarah. Yeah, just sit down. Yeah, I got enough sleep. Yeah, I called a Korean cab. They're cheap, like 20 bucks or something. Yeah, it's not that bad. Yeah, it's funny because they make you act like you're their family or something in case cops hit them with a ticket at the airport. Yeah, wait, hang on. Hey. Yeah, I see the cab coming. Yeah, I'll call you when I get to the airport, okay? Get some rest. All right, love you. Bye. 안녕하세요. JFK Terminal 5이요.
제이슨.
아빠?
이런 데서 너를 보고 참 별일이다. 어쩐지 손님한테 전화하니까 너한테 전화가 가더라. 네, 019차 10-2 JFK입니다.
23분입니다.
네, 감사합니다. 수고하세요.
아빠가 택시 운전해?
어떻게 하다 보니 그렇게 됐다. 이젠 니네 엄마도 몸이 안 좋아서 가게 파트타임이 됐고 아빠도 이제 파트타임밖에 안 주네. 그 시간이 남으니까 하게 됐지.
Then how long you been doing this?
뭐라고?
얼마나 했냐고.
10주. 내일이면 딱 10주째다. 재밌어. 이 사람 저 사람 만나고 야 무엇보다도 기계 안 만져도 되니까 편안해서 좋더라. 그래 어디 가냐?
샌프란시스코에서 친구 결혼식.
내일?
No, it's on Sunday, but I'm just going early because Sarah's already there. And I just had some time, so.
그 세라 부모님도 안녕하시고.
Yeah, they're fine.
응, 그래.
아빠, I'll drive.
무슨 소리냐? 가만히 있어. 비행기 타면 피곤할 텐데.
No, I'll drive. Just pull up here.
나서지 말고 가만히 있어. 아빠 말 들어. 그리고 너 지난 일요일 날 엄마가 좀 집에 와서 반찬 좀 가져가라 했는데 왜 안 왔어?
바빴어.
그래도 좀 집에 자주 와라. 엄마 얼굴도 좀 보고 그렇게 멀리 사는 것도 아니면서 말이야. 네 엄마 너밖에 없잖냐.
뭐야?
응, 아무것도 아니야. 몇 시 비행기냐?
6:30. 근데 아빠 차.
아침 안 먹었지?
아빠, what are you doing?
간식거리 좀 사서 출출할 때 먹으라고. 비행장에서는 이런 거 비싸잖아.
그러면은 이거 하고 요건 좀 빼주세요.
아빠 건 왜 빼?
아, 이런 거 많이 먹으면 당에 안 좋아. 예, 아빠가 살게.
아, 아빠 내가 낼게.
에이, 무슨 소리냐?
아니야.
여기 있습니다. 야, 이럴 때 아빠가 사주지 언제 사주냐?
아빠 뭐해?
가끔 이래. 엔진을 바꿔주면 돼.
I don't think it's the engine oil. I think it's the battery.
배터리 갈은 지 얼마 안 됐다. 이 차가 헌차려서 가면서 자꾸 엔진오일이 새. 그래서 매주일 갈아줘야 된대.
누가 그랬어?
누가 그러긴 전 주인이 그랬지.
This is not a company car? Shouldn't the company replace your car?
이놈아, 그런 게 어딨냐. 내 돈 주고 산 차야.
아빠가 산 차라고? 왜?
이따 얘기해.
아니, 아빠가 왜 이 차를 사냐고. 택시 운전하고 산 거야?
그러면 누구 차로 일하냐? 가자. 이게 왜 그러지?
It's not the engine oil.
제이슨. 차 안에서 아빠 전화 좀 갖고 와봐. 내가 다른 차 하나 불러줄게. 넌 빨리 가라.
You don't need to. I already rescheduled my flight to the afternoon.
왜 그랬냐? 넌 여기서 필요 없는데. 빨리 가야 되는 거 아니야?
Dad, it's done. AAA 전화하면 안 돼?
그게 뭔데?
그거 없어?
배터리?
No. 차 픽스하는 회사.
그럴 돈 없다.
But what other choice do we have?
우선 뭐가 문제인지 찾아봐야 될 거 아니야.
They'll figure it out. Let's just call them and ask. 아빠 봐도 모르잖아.
그럴 돈 없다니까? 네가 엔지니어링 공부 다 끝냈으면 이런 거 쉽게 할 거 아니야.
Just because you're an engineer major, that doesn't mean you know car mechanics. They're not the same thing. This is exactly what I'm feeling. Visiting you. So sick of this.
그게 무슨 말이냐?
Tell me about why I didn't do what you told me to do. That's all you talk about. Can't you see that I'm fine without you? I can make my own decisions. I'm tired of you and mom just always on my back.
버르장머리 없기는. 그래서 네가 원하는 대로 지금 나가 살고 있지 않냐? 우리가 너한테 뭘 더 원하기로 했냐? 네가 우리 도와주기로 했냐?
I shouldn't need to. 다른 미국 가족들은 아들이 고등학교 가면 차 사주고 결혼하면 집 사주고 그래. 엄마나 아빠 나한테 뭐 그렇게 해줬어? 난 바라지도 않아. 부탁도 안 해.
나이가 들어서 다 컸는 줄 알았더니 아직도 철이 안 들었어 너는.
철이 안 든 게 아니라 이제 더 많이 보여서 그래. I'm 27 now. That's when you had me. Why couldn't you just start saving up then? Why couldn't you just buy a store or a house? Do you even have a retirement plan? Are you gonna work like this forever? Or do you?
우리는 너만 보고 여기까지 온 거야.
미안하다. 아빠가 많이 부족해서. 열심히 노력은 했는데 혼자로는 너무 부족한 게 많아서 그래서 너한테 의지를 했나 보다. 알게 모르게. 이젠 너도 내 가정을 꾸려나가야 될 텐데 아빠가 너무 큰 짐이 된 것 같구나. 미안하다. 하얀 머리 만나셨네. 밖에 사는 새끼가 왜 울어?
여보, 아니 지금 제이슨이랑 아침 같이 먹고 있어. 어떻게 하다 보니 그렇게 됐네? 참, 그리고 차도 망가져가지고 미사 강한테 맡겨야지 돼. 하루 이틀은 되겠지. 아유, 알았어. 그러지 않아도 아들한테 차 때문에 잔소리 많이 들었어. 야, 엄마 다 받아봐라.
엄마. 알았어.
뭐가 있냐?
그냥 뭐.
그래?
한기가 이 노래를 굉장히 좋아했었었지? 김판규 이제 넌 한 살 7월 6일 이제 넌 한 살 김판규 이 다음에 그거든 튼튼하고 똑똑한 남자로 이민 2세 훌륭한 사람으로 한국 미국 둘 다를 오가며 역사에 남겨질 멋진 인생을
와, Thank you. Thank you for making this film and then sharing with us. Okay. Thank you for everybody here. So let me have first a question to the Julian, the director. So how did this film come about?
Sorry.
Oh.
Wow. Yeah, it's been a long time since I watched it again. But thank you everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you Young and Jennifer and Chicago Public Library for having us. Peter and I have been very close friends since high school, and we were fortunate enough to have developed a friendship and sorry. uh, Peter, Peter, you want to tell us? Sorry.
Thank you everybody for sharing your evening with us. So as Julian got to this himself. Yeah, so Julian and I were high school friends. Grew up in the same neighborhood of Flushing, Queens, New York. It's this Korean American first sort of immigrant neighborhood where a lot of the folks who came in the 80s and 90s come to settle, and we're one of them. And so, but as we were sort of growing up and we shared this dream of wanting to make films, and especially authentic films that, talk about our experiences, we were just looking to our own hometown and thought these streets, these places all have a story, stories that are so personal to us that we live through. And so, with that sort of a mindset, Julian and I, we would commute together on the train, and that's when we would sort of have our ideas meeting. And one day, yeah, Julian was sharing about sort of reflection, his relationship about his own father, and in that discussion, we were like, we need to make a movie out of this. And so that got us into the scripting process. And then at this point, we had started developing a relationship with the Korean American Stories, and that we went to them and to HJ and said, "Can you help us make this film?" And he was like, "Where do we start?" and like you said, with the community's help, we were able to get this film made. But Julian can definitely talk about the personal aspect of what's happened there.
Yeah, sorry. So the time we kind of wrote this film was about the time I was proposing and thinking about starting a new family. And, we were just talking about life and, obviously like those commutes are more than just a train ride. It became like our brainstorm session. It became like our heart to heart moment. And, beyond just the train, we just kind of circled around the block and walked and talked. And, during that course, I kind of talked about, I'm going to be a husband. I'm going to be, eventually I would like to be a father. But, in thinking about my dad and, who he was to me, I vowed I'd never be like my dad. Never. He's never present. He's always working. He's an alcoholic. He's, unstable. So I just kind of made my decision that I'm not going to be like him. And so when I was, starting a family, like we were just talking about that and opening up on that. But there was like one day where I just kind of started talking about it. But I noticed, and then when I met my dad, I've noticed how much he's aged. I started noticing his wrinkles, his gray hair, how thin he got. And, during my adolescence and teenage years, I never, looked at my dad straight. But that was like the one time I saw it and I caught that, and it kind of took me off guard. And I realized the father and the dad that I always knew to be the Superman, just the most powerful and scary person ever, is becoming weak. It's becoming old. And I realized there, like, well, what's gonna happen to him? I really started asking questions and that Jason asked, which was like, are you going to work like this forever? What's your retirement plan? What are you going to do? But I don't know why, but today I really sympathize with the Lincoln Town Car. And I think that was pretty much how my dad ran. Like, he pretty much ran on the oil and changing oil every day, but he keeps going. And that's the way he lives. And even till this day, that's the way he is now. And that's kind of like, how we kind of started. And we just wanted to, reflect upon that kind of experiences and share it, hopefully that it could connect and resonate with anyone who's going through similar experiences and going through similar footsteps. So yeah.
Thank you. Before we are going to the next question, let me give the two questions to the audiences so they can post their answers on the chat box. So the first question for the audiences, which character did you more related to? There are only two characters, so please pick one and then put the reason why. And then question number two, which scene of the film was most moving or meaning to you and why? So please put the answer on the chat box, and at the end of the session, Jennifer will bring your answers to the screen and then we will share it. Okay, let's go ahead. Okay, to the HJ. So, what inspired you? Why did you plan and why did you support the two young men to make this movie?
I think mostly because I had seen one of the first films that they had made, which was called Homework. And that was a story actually about a mother and a child. And actually, you guys could go to our YouTube site and find it, but it's called Homework. It was an incredibly moving film to me. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, that we were always doing recordings of first-person narrative, people saying, this is what happened to me. But this is, with the film, this film, it was our first foray into a fictional narrative. The thing that I realized is the power of these fictional narratives. It's not necessarily a true story, but it's based on someone's experience, right? And because it was such a authentic and real script, we really felt that it would resonate with a lot of different folks. And that's something that I think we've valued together with Peter and Julian, and that's what we tried to continue with the next film, which is called Happy Cleaners. We tried to maintain that sense of realness, sense of authenticity. But most importantly, there are so few films like this. And if you notice, a lot of the dialogue was in Korean. Because that is our reality as immigrants. We speak different languages, and when you can't say certain things, English pops out. And the language is a very fluid thing. And that seemed, when I watched that seems so real to me, as opposed to someone speaking entirely in one language or another, especially in an immigrant family. So seeing this type of authentic representation, seeing our neighborhoods being depicted, and to some degree dispelling the model minority myth. For a lot of folks who might think that all Asians are like doctors and lawyers or something like that, it's not true. There are many of us who struggle day to day like everybody else, and these are just human stories at the end of the day. So we wanted to help create these really beautiful stories because now they will exist forever.
Thank you. So I saw that Julian started to cry from some point. So the question goes to you. What is the most movable or memorable part of this film to you? And then I don't know the audience caught that it or not, but the end of the movie, I could see the real video clip of some family, some father and son. And then I could see the name of you. Is it your family?
Yes, that's me. Yeah, I think my favorite part of the film is the credits. It's something that I'm amazed by because I didn't know my dad had so many recordings of me, like when I was a baby. And that song he plays at the end, he wrote that when I turned 1. It's, in Korean tradition, we do 돌잔치, which is a big kind of celebration for any babies who turn 1. So, we had a lot of guests, and my dad sang that. He wrote that for me. And basically, it's a talking about what he wishes me to be. He talked in the first verse. He talks about like the legacy, like your father is this, your grandfather's name is so and so, and then second verse he talks about, I want you to be, a full Korean and a full American, who's able to navigate between two cultures. And at first I was like, oh, that's so corny. Like, this is the stupidest thing anyone can do. But as I'm growing older, and now that I have a kid, like that really resonated with me. And the first thing I remember when I wrote this with Peter was I wanted to somehow incorporate his music into the film. So the opening scene actually is a rendition of that very exact song. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, the moment that tune came on, I just started crying because I realized like how much my dad thought for me and of me, and now being a dad myself, like I can see how hard it is and what it means to be a dad. So yeah, a lot of growing up, a lot of maturing, a lot of waking up to things. So yeah.
Thank you. So Peter, what is your favorite part of this film?
Boy. I think it definitely has to be the part when Jason does come back and you start seeing close-ups of him noticing sort of the aging father, because what you can substitute dad for mom. It's just that that aha moment where every kid kind of realizes mom and dad, they're not superheroes, they're just still a fallible human person. And then you have a lot of growing up to do, trying to make sense of that fact. And so that has to be like that moment where I'm just kind of like, something I struggle with even today, like just when you think about your own parents and where they are, and when seeing them age, it's
Thank you. Yeah, I like that moment as well. Yeah, it was a kind of releasing part of me. Yeah. Okay. So I got some questions from the director and then producers in advance. And then this question number 3 was very interesting to me too. So I'm so curious how what will be answered from the audiences. So let me give you the question number 3. So would you consider Call Taxi an American film? I really want to hear this answer from the audiences, how they think. I believe that we have Korean American audiences and also non-Korean audiences today. And then I heard that so many Korean words were speaking in the movie. And then 2 characters are Korean. And then all shooting scene happens in the Korean community. So to everybody, the audiences, would you consider Call Taxi an American film? And if so, why? If not, why? And the other question, the sub-question under the question, what does our response say about what it means to be American? So that was very interesting to listen. So at the end, I really wanted to collect the answers from the audience. So let's keep going. So let's start the generation differences, including the emphasis on education. I heard that what father said to son, and then what triggered the son. How do you think about the generation difference?
Anybody? I think children of immigrants, it's something that they always kind of pressure you to be, because our parents are very like blue collar working parents. They have to usually do a lot of physical labor and hard work, right? So their wishes and desires are for their kids to not go through that same kind of suffering and go through the same kind of pain that they do. So they say, well, if you want to live a comfortable life here in America, you should probably have proper education. You should probably get a good degree, a good paying job, and you'll be fine. Because to them, that's what happiness and joy and life is. It's just being comfortable and having the luxury of an own house, car, and not having to worry about rent or bills or anything like that. But I think growing up, we were so like suppressed because we grew up in that kind of condition where everything, we had to buy like $2 mac and cheese and cook that for dinner, or just kind of eat leftovers and be very conservative with our spendings. So we had this kind of like desire to break free from that and be more expressive and be more fulfilled in who we are. So we wanted to pursue a career. Well, I did pursue a career where you can be full of that without any change, without any bonds or binds, anything like that, and just kind of be that. But then there's like a difference in that of how we define joy and happiness and the meaning of life. And I think it's that's what really it is. It's not really, I would say, just because they're older, like they have a very strict definition of education, but it's just the way that they see and perceive life. It's very different. Yeah.
Who else? First wants to talk about yeah.
I think I'll just add a little bit about kind of wanting to, go back a little bit in history. Where did this sort of desire for education come from? And I think you have to really consider the history of Korea and sort of because it's not just the people come here and all of a sudden, oh, it's the immigrant life that's hard, therefore education is the way out. Like that sort of ingrained thought, began even in Korea. Social mobility was only able to happen through education because education leads to a higher paying job. But then the sort of this idea around sort of the importance of survival, why financial security is so important. Like for me, I had an aha moment when my grandfather was hanging out with like some of his similar age buddy, and then like a point of pride for him. And this is, our grandparents are war generation. They grew up under the occupation, so they had that really rough time. He was saying, I didn't let any of my kids starve. My kids never experienced that. And for him, that basic thing of having food on the table that he was able to provide, that's a point of pride. And so, you come from that background, naturally, it's about survival. Like everything else doesn't matter. And the best way to survive is get yourself an education so that, you can sort of break this chain of suffering is sort of how I understood it. And then you come here, whatever your status was back in the whole old country, here, immigrants, that thing is a great equalizer. You're all starting from the bottom. You're all rebuilding. And how do you get out of that is you get yourself an education. And so I can understand why parents are so important for them to ingrain that in us. But then I think as a generation with the American education from childhood, you're starting to realize that's only one side of the coin. And then for us, it's like, oh man, that's important, yes, but there's a whole other aspect that you have to be able to do more than that, and that's where I think the conflict really comes, because by and large, like, and this is something we're going to talk about all the time, like, yes, like we had a certain type of childhood, but just because for us this is we're just growing up in our home country, that is such a huge leg up that parents have to start from immigrant parents, like that generation don't have. And so just by that, chances are we'll do better. And that's what allows us to think about, well, with that privilege, how can we do more? And then I think the source of conflict really comes in there.
Yeah. So there are the generation gap plus the cultural gap because we are immigrant. Yeah, good point. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I believe there's some audience put the question as well, not only the answer from our questions. So I will invite Jennifer soon in 2 minutes. We will talk, so please prepare the questions and answers from the audience to the stage, Jennifer. Then let's talk about the last question among us. What do you want the audience to take away from this forum? So HJ, do you want to answer?
Oh. Actually, yeah, there's something I've been thinking about. It kind of goes back to your initial question of what's the favorite scene. And mine is also what Peter said, which is that particular scene when Jason comes back for a different reason. And it has to do with the question of how does reconciliation happen, right? Like, you have this incredible tension of competing thought processes, and they're both feeling very frustrated and angry. And yet something breaks that ice. And the thing that breaks the ice is when the father looks at the son and says, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry, because you feel the burden of me in your life. And I think that's a really powerful scene. And partly because it doesn't happen a lot in real life. As much as as much as we all aspire to that kind of magnanimity and ability to humble ourselves, to really seek that common ground, that's a really hard thing to do. And I think for that reason, I think that's a really powerful scene. That's what I call an aspirational scene, where it's something that we could aspire to if we seek reconciliation and forgiveness and love. I think the humbling of yourself, and to some degree, is really essential. So yeah.
Thank you. So it's not the end of the discussion.
We could put the link in the chat box. I think one of our staff, Deborah, is out there. So Deborah, if you're out there, can you just put the link in the chat box? If not, we'll send it to you and you can forward it. Yeah.
And I'm sure we can probably go to your website, KoreanAmericanStory.org.
Yeah, it's in our website as well.
Yes. There we
and
go.
Also, it's
so
in
we
our
have
YouTube channel also.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, definitely share that with others. So we have some great comments and questions from the audience when we were asking which scene of the film was most moving to you. People said, I related to both. I'm a parent and I experienced ups and downs with my son and let him go live his life. I remember being the child and having a defining moment understanding my parents. A few other people said noticing Dad's gray hair really got to me. The scene where he really took a look at his father and they hugged, I was crying. Suddenly the parents become human, not the superheroes. It changes your relationship. So those are some great comments on that.
Yeah.
And then when we asked, do you consider Call Taxi an American film, a Korean film? Why or why not? And what does that say about what it means to be American? A lot of people said it's both, or it's Korean American, or it could be made possibly in Korea and be a similar story as it is now. So I'm curious what you guys think about that. If this movie could be something that would have been made from the perspective of somebody in Korea.
Maybe. I mean, sure.
Maybe a similar story.
Right, but I think, yes, it is very specifically Korean American, but I'm sure a lot of people could relate to kind of, what the story behind, what this film is about. I think, I personally feel this is a very, very American film. I mean, yes, it is, language-wise, there's some Korean in there, and there are some cultural references that's very Korean. But I think growing up, we started off making this film in trying to redefine the American narrative by adding, our experiences and our authenticity into the story. And then when you look at me, I am in between. I am very I could, I could go between Korea and America and adjust well. But I think ultimately what I wish for my son and for the future generation is for not to go through the same kind of perspective where people look at you and be like, you're not American, you're just an Asian, you're just Korean, you can't be part of this American narrative. I don't want them to go through the same kind of situation that I did, but rather be like accepted that you are American, and it doesn't matter what kind of culture you're in, what kind of how you identify yourself, and that's just what we wanted to go for. Yeah.
That's great. We have a lot of people in the comments who are saying that this is a universal story and sharing some of their struggles with their own parents. So it definitely seems like many people have had similar experiences. Other folks are saying their favorite scene was when they were eating, and then Jason spoke with his mother. That sounds exactly like my conversations with my Kinama, my aunt who raised me. So it's really...
Yep.
Well, universality of generation gap is being brought up a lot here in the comments, which I think is very true. A couple of other questions we had is, what advice do you have for people who want to document their own family's journey or story for their, other family members or just for their community or their neighbors?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think I could answer that primarily because we've done recording of family stories for 10 years. In terms of exactly how to do it, I think it really is going to depend on whatever the resources you have. But what I can tell you is that a lot of our parents' generation and grandparents' generation, ironically, they don't really want to talk about their past, especially because there's so much of trauma from the Korean War. It's not a pleasant experience that they want to necessarily relive. So what we always try to do is, I say this very jokingly, but we say instead of saying your story's so interesting and all that, we say, you know what, they speak the language of sacrifice and basically say things like, and guilt. That's what they use on us. So say things like, I need you to do this for your grandchildren. I know you don't want to do it, but suck it up, because this is something that your grandchildren, your story is something that your grandchildren need to know. And, ironically, I think it works pretty well. But I say that, once again, half jokingly. But providing a particular forum in which they could fully express themselves, I think is very important. And the process is sometimes very slow. They start out talking, very reluctantly. But by the time they really get into it, there's so much packed in there that I find that a lot of times it just comes bursting out. So the most important thing is creating an opportunity and a very specific understanding that you're asking them something meaningful. Because it's not like you could sit at a dinner table and go, hey, Mom, do you have any regrets in life? It's just awkward, right? But if you have, a setting, a camera with lights, and let them know that this is really important to you, that sharing of this, stories of oscillation in their life could be a blessing to you and your children, and allow them, that opportunity, and creating that separate space, I think is really important.
That's great advice. I think that's so true. We have so many people who come into the library who are interested in, things like genealogy and researching their family story. But you're right that there's, so many opportunities right in front of us that we don't think to necessarily ask members of our own family.
Absolutely.
So that's great advice. We have just a couple more minutes, so I want to ask one more question to everybody. What other movies or TV that feature sort of Asian American stories or immigrant stories do you enjoy? So give us your list of TV and movie recommendations that you think are good representations.
That's a tough one.
There aren't many.
Maybe I can add one. The Ode to My Father. Did you watch
Ode
that
to My
movie?
Father, yeah.
Yeah, I would like to recommend that movie. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was great.
It's great.
I always recommend Spotlight by Andrew An. It's a really good film.
Spotlight, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds to me like you guys need to make some more movies and TV. We need more recommendations here, right?
Oh, why
Well-
don't you explain about the Happy Cleaner little more?
Well,
Yeah,
yes.
tell us a
so
little bit about the new
yeah.
project.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the new project that's we actually finished it. It went through the film festivals, and now it's in distribution. So we're expecting some sort of a deal by January of next year. We hope to be in video on demand services like Netflix or Amazon or one of those services. But it's kind of like Call Taxi, except much longer. It's a feature-length film, and so we have a lot more time to develop characters and such. And it's, I mean, I know these guys are, and I'm so proud that that film was made. I think we looked it up, and truly it was once again funded by the community. Even the people who worked on it, I think 60 some odd percent were Korean Americans, 70 some odd percent were Asian Americans, and something like 80% or something like that were people of color. So it was really important that it was a film made for us, by us. And so it has a real sense of authenticity. About, once again, an immigrant life. It's about a family that's struggling to make it as work, and they own a dry cleaning business in Flushing, and they're not doing very well. So it's a story that surrounds that drama, but we call it a KA drama as opposed to K drama. So it's there's a lot of tears, a lot of emotion, a lot of conflict. It's good.
Well, it sounds
guys
like we'll
wanna say
have to have
something?
you back next year and screen that
Oh,
one,
yeah.
right?
I think so.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So thank you again for joining us. And then Jennifer, do you want to wrap up today's program?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks again to everyone for watching, for being here, for leaving such wonderful questions and comments in the chats. Thanks, of course, to Young Park and the Asian American and Pacific Islander Committee at CPL for all of their wonderful work that they do year-round. Thanks to H.E. Lee and the KoreanAmericanStory.org. Check out that website. So many wonderful resources there. To Julian Kim and Peter Lee of Call Taxi. I want to mention a few upcoming programs. Our One Book, One Chicago season does go through the end of this year, and there's many wonderful programs for you, including this Friday, we have our first edition of Snacks in the Stacks. It's CPL's own cooking show featuring cooks from the CPL community making dishes from books found on the shelves. So I hope you'll join us Friday at noon for that. On Monday, October 26th, we have an African dance workshop with Muntu Dance Theater, so make sure you register for that and get your dance on. And then on Wednesday, October 28th, we have Fashion Beyond Borders with special guest Hoda Katebi, so do tune into YouTube for that. And then finally, I just want to mention, if you are a Korean speaker and you enjoy reading books in Korean, Exit West is available in Korean at the library, so please go check it out and enjoy it. And also come to our Korean book discussion on December 12th and talk about Exit West with others. And we would love to have you. It will be virtual, and you can find all the details at onebookonechicago.org. Thanks again for everyone for being here, and have a wonderful night.